Okay, so I want you to try a little thought experiment with me right now. Just look down at the floor. Or the sidewalk, or whatever is beneath your feet at this exact moment.
You probably trust it, right? I mean, it's solid.
Exactly. It's there. It dictates where you can walk and maybe what kind of shoes you're going to wear today.
But imagine a universe where that ground doesn't just dictate your footwear.
Right. Imagine it dictates your biology. It forces your entire technology down this violently narrow path. And ultimately, it completely defines your morality.
You're really talking about the concept of geography as destiny, but taken to this absolute interstellar extreme.
Yes, exactly. Because we are looking at some source material for our deep dive today that is, frankly, terrifying in its implications. We're unpacking the NeoMercy Clan universe.
And for anyone listening who thinks this is just another standard sci-fi setting with laser swords and spaceships.
Stop right there.
Yeah, just stop. Because the creators don't even call it a setting. They specifically call it a story engine.
A story engine, which is such a wild distinction to make.
It's crucial, though. When you call something a story engine, you're implying it has hard-coded rules. It's more like a simulation.
Which there's no cheating.
Exactly. This isn't a universe where a writer can just invent a new superpower because they wrote themselves into a corner. It's a massive interconnected system comprising 100 unique worlds.
Plus that specific subset.
Yes, the Earthline series.
Earthline.
Huh?
Which, it just sounds so ominous to me.
It definitely is. It refers to planet IDs 101 through 110. And the reason we call it an engine is that the physics and the sociology are entirely locked together. You are a product of your planet. Period.
So there's no improvising your way out of your own evolution.
None whatsoever.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how this engine actually runs. And the best way to do that isn't to look at the whole galaxy at once, because frankly, that's just too big.
Way too big.
We are going to zoom in on one specific nightmare scenario. We are traveling to planet ID 105, also known as Skydale, or Earth 05.
Which is a really fascinating choice. It is a perfect case study for the brutality of this system.
And we're going to look at a character who is essentially the poster child for survival of the fittest. Zephryan, the Stormborn of Silence.
Quite a title.
I know, right? Now, I've read through the source material and the feats this guy pulls off, rewriting weather systems, turning his body into diamond. It sounds like superhero stuff.
It does on the surface.
But the more I read, the more I realized this isn't a hero story at all. It's a horror story about physics.
That's a great way to put it. Zephryan really represents the brutal interstellar survival logic of this entire mythos. He isn't a hero. He is a result.
Right, a very scary result. But before we get to the man himself, we got to understand the rules of the game here. The sources lay out a specific chain reaction for how civilization works in the NeoMercy universe. It's a 3-step process.
Right. The golden rule of the engine is world shape species. Species shape society. And society shapes technology.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Because usually we think we have free will, right? We think, hey, I can build a computer anywhere I want.
Not here. Think about it. If you live on a high-gravity world with absolutely zero accessible metal deposits, you are never going to build a microchip.
You just can't.
You're going to evolve dense muscle mass to survive the gravity. And your technology is likely going to be biological.
Like beasts of burden or genetic manipulation.
Precisely. So your entire culture, your religion, your way of waging war, it's all just downstream from how much gravity is there.
It's all predetermined by dirt and air.
And this creates enormous friction. The conflict in the NeoMercy universe doesn't come from a dark lord trying to take over the galaxy just to be evil.
There's no Sauron.
Right. The conflict comes from fundamental incompatibility. You have resource scarcity, trade disputes, and ideological clashes between species that are entirely alien to one another.
Because their planets made them that way.
Exactly. They literally cannot understand each other's perspectives.
It feels very gritty, almost geopolitical, but on a cosmic scale. And sitting on top of all this chaos, watching it like kids with a magnifying glass over an anthill, you have the Nine.
Yes, the Nine. They are the omnipotent entities of this setting. Think of them as the ultimate arbiters. Or perhaps auditors is a better one.
Auditors! I like that. They're checking the math.
They really are. They are specifically watching the Earthline worlds. And they enforce the consequences. If a species tries to break the rules of the engine, say by developing technology that shouldn't be possible for their biome, the Nine step in.
So there is a referee, and they are not forgiving.
Not in the slightest. You break the rules of the engine and you get corrected. Harshly.
Okay, so keeping that core rule in mind world's shape species, let's land on Skydale, planet ID 105, located in the Zephryan expanse. Now, I have to say, just reading it, the name Skydale sounds lovely.
It does sound nice.
It sounds like a place where hobbits would go on a summer vacation.
It sounds idyllic right until you actually look at the topography maps in the files.
Yeah.
This is a world of skies. We are talking massive mountain citadels piercing the upper cloud layers.
Just floating rock spires, basically.
Endless air currents. And almost no ground in the traditional sense.
So if you fall off the front porch...
You fall for miles until the atmospheric pressure literally crushes you. There is no safety net on Skydale.
Jeez. And the dominant species here are the Venthar. To the naked eye reading the visual descriptions, they look human.
Superficially, yes.
But looking at their stat specs, they're definitely not us.
They resemble humans, but their biology is radically different to cope with that extreme high-altitude environment. And a key detail here is they live for 230 years.
That lifespan is huge. Just imagine if you had 2 centuries to perfect a single skill.
It completely changes their society. It allows for deep-seated traditions and absolute mastery of their environment. The Venthar are described as living in harmony with the air. They glide. They weave the currents.
They sound like peaceful monks of the sky.
They do.
And here's where the source material really threw me for a loop. There is a massive contradiction in their file. I was looking at the stat sheet, and under aggression level, the Venthar are rated a 10.
Yes. Which is the maximum rating in this entire system.
Right. How do you have harmony with the air and aggression level 10 in the same profile? That felt like a typo to me at first. Are they monks or are they monsters?
It is definitely not a typo. It is what sociologists in this universe call the paradox of the defensive predator.
The defensive predator?
The source material explains that while the Venthar are typically peaceful within their own currents.
As long as you leave them alone.
Right. If they sense outside aggression, if they feel their way of life is even slightly threatened by an off-worlder, they have absolutely no reservations about committing genocide.
Whoa. Genocide. Just like that.
Total erasure.
Yeah.
They will wipe out an entire planet to ensure their own safety. They don't do skirmishes. They don't do border disputes.
So it's not, we will fight you until you surrender. It's, we will delete your species from the galaxy.
Exactly. It's that survival logic of the engine again. Peace on Skydale is maintained not by treaties, but by the threat of absolute total destruction.
Mutually assured destruction, but they're the only ones holding the button.
Yes. They are safe, because everyone in the galaxy knows if you poke the Venthar, you don't get a war. You get erased.
That is horrifyingly efficient. And I think that brings us right to Zephryan. Because if the Venthar are dangerous as a species, Zephryan is what happens when you distill that danger into a single person.
He is the perfect lens through which we can see this world. And what's interesting is his story isn't a chosen one narrative.
Thank goodness. I get so tired of those.
Right. He wasn't born into a palace. He wasn't touched by a god. He comes from this ancient, very feared bloodline marked by secret techniques.
And we really have to talk about his upbringing, because calling it abusive feels like we're letting his dad off the hook. This was torture.
It was absolutely torture, just disguised as training.
His father's parenting style was basically, hey, kids, see that Category 5 hurricane over there? Go play in it.
Literally. From the time he could walk, he was driven out into the storms. He was taught not to fear suffocation.
Which goes against every biological instinct a creature has.
Entirely. He had to learn to read the air pressure and the chemical sense on the wind just to survive his childhood. But the turning point, the moment that truly made him what he is, happened when he was just 10 years old.
This part of the source material gave me actual chills. He's 10 years old, and he inhales pure vacuum. Walk us through what that actually means biologically.
Okay, so in Skydale, because of the incredibly chaotic weather systems, you get these pockets of extremely low pressure, near vacuum states just floating in the sky.
Like invisible landmines.
Exactly. Zephryan was pushed into one by his father. Now, most organic beings would die instantly in that environment.
Because there's no oxygen.
It's worse than that. The fluids in your lungs would boil, your alveoli would rupture violently, your eardrums would burst.
It's like the bends, but instantly and everywhere all at once.
Exactly. Zephryan survived it, but the physical damage was catastrophic. Collapsed lungs, shattered ribs from the sudden massive pressure drop. He was completely broken.
And when he finally wakes up, gasping for air with his ribs pulverized, does his dad say, "I'm so sorry, son, I went too far"?
No. His father leans in and says, Only you are meant to walk in silence where even the stars cannot breathe.
That is just so messed up.
It framed his incredible trauma as his destiny. That moment defined his entire existence moving forward. He wasn't just a flyer anymore. He became a creature of the void.
He learned that heir isn't a right. It's a privilege you have to violently fight for.
Yes.
And that trauma leads directly to the development of his abilities. And I want to get a bit technical here because the critique we often see of sci-fi is that it's just magic masquerading as science. But Zephryan's combat style is deeply grounded in fluid dynamics.
It is very hard sci-fi combat. Let's start with the ice form. This is the family's great secret technique. The texts describe it as invincibility distilled.
How does it actually work? Is he literally turning into ice?
No, that's just the poetic name for it. It actually involves manipulating his own body's molecular density.
Okay.
He subconsciously compresses his own cellular structure, turning his skin and muscles into a hardened shell that is stronger than the hardest known metal in the universe.
Wow.
But it's fleeting. It's a temporary burst of absolute defense. He can't hold it forever.
So you have a guy who can survive a pure vacuum and briefly turn his skin into diamond, but he isn't just a defensive tank. He is an offensive weapon.
Because his combat style is entirely dictated by his environment. Remember the rule. Worlds shape species. He is from a world of air. So he weaponizes the atmosphere. He doesn't need a gun or a sword.
This really stood out to me in the combat reports in the files. He is fighting an entire platoon of soldiers, and he's not punching them. He's suffocating them.
He manipulates partial pressures around his enemies.
Yeah.
He can create localized vacuums right around a target's head. He literally pulls the oxygen directly out of their lungs.
That is terrifying.
Or he uses high-pressure streams. Think of an industrial water jet cutter that can slice through thick steel, but he's doing it with compressed air.
The sources mention he can tear a hole in a heavily armored ship's hull with such precision that it doesn't even rupture the engine core, it just kills the crew inside.
That requires an insane, intuitive understanding of structural integrity and pressure gradients. It was purely surgical. He isn't throwing lightning bolts or fireballs. He is doing math with the atmosphere to kill you.
But he also has this mist form, right? Which sounds incredibly cool turning into vapor. But the sources actually say it's his biggest risk.
It is a desperate measure. The first time he used it, he nearly died. His consciousness completely fragmented.
Because he's losing his physical anchor.
Imagine your mind scattering into a billion tiny water droplets drifting apart in a gale force wind. You lose your sense of self. You forget who you are.
It's the exact opposite of the ice form.
Precisely. Ice form is total solidity and control. Mist form is total dissolution and surrender. Zephryan is constantly balancing between being an unbreakable object and vanishing into absolute nothingness.
That feels like a metaphor for his psyche, really.
It is. He's always living right on the edge of losing his humanity.
So we have this living weapon, and we move into the later acts of his story in the source material. There's this overarching prophecy of chaos, a warning that galactic trials are coming and only the absolute strongest will stand among the nine.
And while the elders of Skydale were terrified of this prophecy, Zephryan just ran straight toward it. This is where we see him shift from being a skilled warrior to a literal force of nature.
He stops just surviving the storms and starts rewriting them.
Yes.
There's a scene where he covers half the planet in a massive storm system just for practice. It sounds like he's trying to fight God.
He was preparing for the final audit, what they call the ordeal of storms. This wasn't a battle against a physical enemy. It was a battle against the planet itself.
Break down the ordeal for us, because reading it, it feels like the final exam from hell.
It had distinct stages. First was the void stance. He had to stand completely still where the air thins out to absolute silence, surviving for hours where biology says he should fail.
Just a test of pure endurance.
Then came the sheer corridors.
These are those jet streams designed to cut solid stone right.
Correct. Imagine walking down a hallway where the wind is moving at Mach speeds in opposite directions, slicing at you. He just walked right through them.
Unbelievable.
But he didn't just endure the pain, he reshaped the flow. He created pockets of perfect stillness inside the chaos as he walked. That is a profound level of mastery. You aren't fighting the wind anymore. You are telling the wind exactly where to go.
But the moment that really stood out to me, and I want to get your expert take on this because it seems so counterintuitive, was the final chamber. He's getting hit with plasma lashes, impact pylons, just total destruction raining down on him from all sides.
Right.
He pops the ice form. He's invincible. He's winning.
And then he ends it early.
Why drop your invincibility shield when you're actively being shot at by lasers? That seems like a massive tactical error.
It was a statement. He wanted to show the nine and himself. that the ice form wasn't a crutch.
Oh, wow.
He didn't need the ancient family technique to survive. His will alone was enough. He walked out of that chamber under his own power. He was bleeding, he was broken, but he was standing.
And the council's verdict after all that?
Parameters exceeded. Control absolute. Collateral minimal.
That is so incredibly cold. Collateral minimal, like that's the highest praise you can get.
It is the ultimate compliment in a society like Skydale. They do not care about bravery. They do not care about heroism or heart. They only care about control.
So what does this all mean for us as readers? We
Right.
have this character, Zephryan. He survives the vacuum. He masters the storm. He terrifies his own people. At the end of the narrative, he's standing alone on a spire, watching the lightning flash. And he doesn't feel like a hero.
No, he doesn't. He feels like a calculator. He just sees equations. He sees pressure patterns. He was not chosen by the gods. He wasn't the special one because of some mystical prophecy. He was forged.
That's the key word for this entire universe. Forged.
The environment of Skydale, the harsh vacuums, the endless storms, the crushing atmospheric pressure. It created the exact specific conditions needed to diamond press this traumatized boy into a weapon. He is the ultimate living expression of that aggression level 10.
It's deeply tragic in a way. Even the Venthar, who are scary enough on their own with their literal genocide policy, they look at him and think, okay, that is too much. You are too dangerous even for us.
He has become a force of reckoning. He can unmake the very skies that birthed him. And that brings us right back to the core theme of the NeoMercy Clan universe that we started with today.
Geography is destiny.
Exactly. Zephryan is a terrifyingly consistent product of his world's rules. If you grow up in a world where the heir actively tries to kill you every single day, you either die or you learn to kill the heir. Zephryan killed the heir.
It really makes you appreciate the story engine concept we talked about at the start. You couldn't take Zephryan and drop him into a cyberpunk city or a magical fantasy forest and have his character make any sense.
No, you really couldn't. He is specifically designed for Skydale. If you put him on a water world, his powers over air pressure wouldn't translate the same way. He is entirely endemic to his environment.
And that's what makes the Earthline series so compelling to dig into. When you have the Nine watching these worlds, watching a character like Zephryan, they aren't looking at a hero on a journey. They're looking at a variable, a highly dangerous, highly competent variable in their simulation.
And I think that is exactly why the source material resonates so strongly with people. It constantly asks how much of us is just a biological response to where we are.
I just can't help but think about that childhood trauma again, that vacuum incident when he was 10. It feels like everything Zephryan does later in life, every storm he controls, every lung he collapses, is just him desperately trying to prove to his father or maybe to the universe that he won't suffocate.
It is the ultimate drive for control. If you control the storm cannot hurt you anymore. But in doing so, he isolated himself completely from everyone else. He walks in silence just like his father said he would. He's the safest man on the planet, and simultaneously, he's the loneliest man on the planet.
So we've gone from a 10-year-old boy with collapsed lungs to a galactic warrior who rewrites atmospheric chaos. It's a hell of a character arc.
It really is. And it serves as a pretty stark warning, I think.
How so?
It shows the absolute cost of perfection. Zephryan achieved absolute control over his environment, but he lost his connection to his own kind in the process. He is feared, not loved. In the NeoMercy universe, survival is the highest possible goal. But Zephryan's existence compels us to ask what is left of you when you survive everything. When you have armor so thick that absolutely nothing can hurt you, can you even feel anything anymore?
That is the big question, and I think that brings us to the end of this deep dive into Skydale and the Stormborn today.
A truly terrifying place and a terrifying man.
Absolutely. So here is the thought we want to leave you with today. We talked a lot about how the environment shapes the species. Zephryan learned to control the storms outside, but he did it by becoming a storm himself.
He had to internalize the chaos to master it.
Exactly. So in a universe, or hey, even in your own life where your surroundings dictate so much of who you are, is it actually possible to transcend your environment? Or are you, like Zephryan, always just a reflection of the harshest conditions you've managed to survive?
Are you the pilot, or are you just the plane weathering the turbulence?
That is definitely something to think about the next time you're caught outside in a rainstorm. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the NeoMercy Clan universe. We will catch you on the next world.
Stay safe out there.